Today I'm going to show how to reduce wheel hop in a 2022 or newer Elantra N by installing a three-piece solution from Powerflex. This solution is designed to help reduce or eliminate wheel hop with the least amount of adverse effects to the car from increasing NVH. The three pieces consist of Powerflex's upper engine, lower engine, and transmission bushings. These items were all purchased from N75 Motorsports. Powerflex sells three harnesses for each item, from softest to hardest: Street Yellow, Performance Purple, and Race Black. N75 recommends the following for the Elantra N: Race Black for the upper and transmission mounts, and either purple or black for the lower engine mount. I chose to go with purple since this is my daily driver and not taken to track events. I chose to install the lower engine mount bushings first. I began by raising the car on the driver's side. The lower engine mount is easily accessible at the rear of the engine. You'll need to remove the engine mount so we can install the new bushings. It is recommended to support the transmission using a jack and a small piece of wood or plastic block. The transmission would be to the right of the engine mount. I found this was not necessary for the install. Remove the two 14mm bolts located at the rear of the mount. Next, remove the larger 17mm bolt located to the front side of the mount. I used an impact wrench to make removing the bolts easier. After the bolts have been removed, slide the mount towards the front of the car and down to remove it. Now that the lower engine mount has been removed, you'll need to disassemble the mount. It is recommended to use a vise to secure the mount for this step. I was able to disassemble the mount without using a vise. To disassemble the mount, use a 14mm socket and remove the bolt located at the rear of the mount. Once the bolt has been removed, pull each piece that was held into place by the bolt apart. There are four pieces: the top plate, first bushing, large center plate, and second bushing. With the mount disassembled, remove the two factory bushings and set them to the side. Using the supplied grease, apply grease to the inner and outer areas of both the new bushings. Slide one of the bushings onto the mount. Next, push the larger metal piece over the bushing. Slide the other bushing into the top of the metal plate. Make sure you're installing the bushings the same way they were removed from the mount. Finally, install the top plate and 14mm bolt. You will now need to torque the bolt in the engine mount. This is where a vise will come in handy. Place the mount into the vise and torque the bolt to 40 foot-pounds. After the bolt has been secured and torqued down to spec, you can reinstall the mount back into the car. Slide the rear of the mount into place first. Then install the front 17mm bolt into the side of the mount. Next, install the two 14mm rear bolts. Hand tighten the three bolts. You'll then need to torque the front 17mm bolt to 75 foot-pounds and the two 14mm rear bolts to 50 foot-pounds. After all the bolts have been torqued down, the installation of the rear motor mount bushings is complete. After I installed the rear motor mount, I decided to move on to the transmission mount since the car was already raised on the driver's side. To begin, you'll need to remove the driver's side wheel. Next, using your jack, place a small piece of wood or plastic block on the jack and position the jack underneath the transmission. Put enough pressure on the transmission to hold it into place. Locate the small square cover inside the wheel well and remove the cover. This will provide access to the transmission mount. With the cover removed, you'll see two bolts. Remove both of the 14mm bolts. As you remove the second bolt, you may notice the transmission shift down a bit and the holes no longer line up. Using your jack, jack up the transmission until the holes are realigned. Using the grease included with the bushing, apply it over the protruding pieces of the bushing. Install the bushing with the connecting section at the bottom and the open section at the top as shown in the video. After the bushing has been pushed into place, install the supplied metal cover with the two 14mm factory bolts. Hand tighten the two bolts. You may need to adjust the jack holding the transmission if the holes are not perfectly aligned. This is not a big issue, just take your time and make sure the bolts slide into place and tighten into position without having to force them. This will avoid damage or cross-threading the bolts. Once the bolts are tightened, you'll need to torque the bolts to 75 foot-pounds. After the bolts have been torqued to spec, place the cover back on, reinstall the wheel, and lower the car back to the ground. This completes the transmission bushing installation. The third and final bushing to install is the upper motor mount bushing. To install this bushing, you will need to raise the car on the passenger side. Position the jack underneath the left side of the engine. Using the jack and a small piece of wood or plastic block, put slight pressure on the black section of the engine shown in the video. You do not need to apply a lot of pressure. Open the hood and locate and remove the 17mm nut holding the upper engine mount in place. This nut is located to the right of the coolant tank. After you've removed the nut, apply grease to the bottom of the bushing. Insert the bushing over the top of the engine mount bolt. Press the bushing firmly into place. This bushing should sit flush with the top of the engine mount. Next, take the aluminum insert and push it down into the center of the bushing. This too should sit flush inside the center of the bushing. You may want to put a small amount of grease on this piece to help it slide into the center of the bushing. After the bushing and insert have been installed, reinstall the factory nut and torque it down to 75 foot-pounds. This completes not only the installation of the upper motor bushing, but the entire installation of the Powerflex products. My final thoughts and impressions of the products. These three pieces are designed to help increase engine and transmission stability under acceleration, which in turn should help reduce or eliminate torque steer and wheel hop. With that in mind, I can say I noticed an immediate difference in the car after installing these products. The first thing I noticed was an increased steering heaviness. I have the car set to normal steering regardless of mode, so if you have the car set to a sportier steering setting, you may notice a bigger difference in how much effort it takes to turn the steering wheel. As far as wheel hop and torque steer goes, I noticed a much improved takeoff in the car. The car has very little torque steer and the wheel hop is almost non-existent. The car hooks up much better with wheel spin instead of wheel hop. This can change with other factors such as weather, tires, and amount of power added to the car. I would highly recommend this route to correcting wheel hop over a single solid rear motor mount. Not only will a solid rear motor mount increase NVH with little increase to wheel hop reduction versus this solution, but it will cost over twice as much as these products. If you want the absolute maximum wheel hop reduction and plan to take your car to a track, then solid motor mounts may be a solution for you, but I would say if this is for your daily driver, you'd be hard-pressed to find a better solution, especially for this cost. I wanted to add takeoff clips, but due to current weather where I live, it's simply too cold and I wouldn't be able to provide proper clips to show off the bushings improvements. I may take video of takeoffs in the car when the weather gets warmer. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe for more content.